Good evening. Welcome to the February 4th, 2019 meeting of the Stillwater City Council. I am missing my gavel, but I will call the meeting to order without it. We have a guest with us today, Jacob Levicki, to help lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance. Jacob, you'd come up to the front. Please stand. Oh, there it is.
Attention, salute the pledge. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thanks for being here, Jacob. We appreciate your leading the pledge for us. Tell me a little bit about what you do you're a student at Meridian and a member of the Business Professionals of America, correct?
Yeah. So my name is Jacob Levicki, and I am a senior at Stillwater High School and a business student, like you said, at Meridian. And today I'm just here to share with you about my leadership experience. So from the very day that I took an oath of membership to my organization to now as I stand before you, Business Professionals of America has absolutely changed my life for the better. And for thousands of students across the nation, BPA serves as a doorway into a world of incredible opportunities. So for me, BPA is innovation and creativity. Every day we work towards the creation of world-class citizens who are willing to think outside of the box and who refuse to settle for the status quo. In our organization, not even the sky is the limit. We teach our members that if there is no solution at hand, we should go out and create one. BPA is empowerment. No matter how many adversities we have faced, we know that we can always find a light at the end of the tunnel. And this organization is actively empowering a future generation to not just do well in life, but to become living success stories for all to see. But you may be wondering, what does BPA do? So BPA uses real-world scenario business competitions to teach us about the business world. Each year, Oklahoma BPA hosts a state leadership conference where students gather together to compete and learn about leadership. I'm currently serving as the state vice president of Oklahoma BPA. So myself and my 6 other state officers will be co-hosting this conference very soon, and we're very excited. After that, the top competitors move to national competition where we compete on the national level. And BPA's national theme is Together We Create, because we believe that together we create progress, opportunities, and the future. Throughout my time in BPA, I have learned that I have the power to change the world, and that if I just simply believe in myself, I can do anything. BPA has given me confidence. In fact, it is what has encouraged me to be here today. So I would like to conclude my time with one simple request to you all, the City Council, and anyone who may be listening. I would request that if you are ever given the opportunity to support BPA or join BPA, I strongly encourage you to do so, because I believe that the positive effects that we have on our members and our communities is truly priceless. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for being here.
No problem. Do you mind if I take the picture?
Please, come on up.
Okay.
I think with the whole council?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. That'd be okay. That'd be cool.
Squeeze in.
I appreciate it.
Let me get out of the way.
Can you get us all in?
Thank you so much.
Thanks for being here. Oh, I do have a gift for you somewhere. Here it is, Jacob.
Oh.
Everybody who comes and speaks gets a piece of chocolate.
Thank you so much.
Not everybody, not the rest of you guys. You have to lead the pledge.
And I wanted to say, Jacob, you brought 2 people with you tonight. You want to introduce them as well?
Yeah, this is my mom, Krista, and my dad works here.
Thank you very much. Okay, that takes us to item 3 on the agenda, the consent docket. Councilors, any comments, questions, or motions on the consent docket?
Motion to accept the consent docket.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to accept the consent docket. Please vote. With a vote of 5-0, the consent docket is approved. Okay, public comment on items not scheduled for public hearing. For the council, I think all of these are for SEDA, but let me double check. I think they are. This is for one of the agenda items?
Right.
Yep. Okay, so no one signed up to speak to the council on agenda items, so we'll jump down to item 6, public hearings. Item A, receive public comment regarding a request for a specific use permit from SUA Properties LLC to allow a medical marijuana dispensary in the CG Commercial General District at a property addressed at 1925 North Boomer Road. This is CC-19-11. Mr. Dorman, did we have good notice on this issue?
Yes, sir.
Mr. McNichol.
Paula Dennison, our Director of Development Services, will provide the report.
Good evening. Thank you. This is, once again, a medical marijuana dispensary specific use permit. The property is located 1925 North Boomer Road. As you can see, outlined in purple is the property. Here's Boomer Road. And outlined in yellow is the area of the individual building where the dispensary is proposed to go. This is the vacant property that is circled where the dispensary is proposed. We do have a copy of their state license. They have fulfilled all of the requirements of the specific use permit with the city of Stillwater. Are there any questions for me?
Council?
Pretty straightforward.
Thank you, Paula.
Yes.
This time I will open the public hearing. We don't have anyone signed up to speak. Now, I will just ask real quickly, I do have a sheet here from Kristen from Ponca Organic. I'm not sure, are you here for one of the medical marijuana dispensary items? I don't have one listed from Ponca Organic. Do you know which one you're?
The actual name will be the dispensary.
C.
That's C? Okay, we'll get to that one in a second. Thank you.
No.
Is it,
I'm sorry?
do you know the address?
It's this one's the first one.
Okay, that's the one that,
Yeah, yeah.
is it Kristen? Would you like to come speak on this item?
Hello. Let's see. So yes, the location is as it says, and just wanted to speak for a second and ease everyone's minds. I know the stigma behind this, we all know, can be not great, but I just want to let everyone know that we're seeing with the other stores that we have across the state, the average patient is 55 years old, and with ailments and diseases like lupus, cancer, depression, anxiety. So we're just excited to be able to have a place that kind of shows everyone that cannabis is different than what they think it is, and bring a lot of good things to your city.
Right.
That's about it.
Thank you. Any questions? Thank you. All right, I will close the public hearing, and I'll ask staff to come give us Planning Commission recommendation.
Thank you. The Planning Commission does recommend approval with a 5-0 vote.
All right. Councilors, questions, comments, or motions?
Motion to approve item A, the specific use permit for SUA Properties LLC.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to approve item A. Please vote. With a vote of 4-1, the item is approved. All right, takes us to item B, receive public comment regarding request for specific use permit from Brad Pritchett to allow a medical marijuana dispensary in the CB Commercial Business District at property addressed as 809 South Main Street. This is CC-19-09. Mr. Dorman, did we have good notice on this item?
Yes, sir.
Paula?
Paula will do several of these.
Thank
have
you.
it.
I'll just stay up here for a few
Yeah.
minutes if y'all don't mind. This is another dispensary request at 809 South Main Street. This is the property that is in the hatched area, Main Street, and this property is located about halfway between 8th and 9th. Only the front part or the western portion of this building is being utilized for the dispensary. And this is the location and the front view of the property that it will be proposed in. And again, I'd be happy to answer any questions.
All right, I will open the public hearing for this item. I don't have anyone signed up to speak, so I will close the public hearing and we'll ask for Planning Commission recommendation.
Planning Commission does recommend approval of this also with the 4-0 vote.
Thank you, Paula. Council, questions, comments, or motions? You guys are super eager for these, aren't you?
Motion to approve specific use permit for 809 South Main Street.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to approve the request. Please vote. With a vote of 4-1, the item is approved. Item C, receive public comment regarding a request for a specific use permit from Bonzini Enterprises, DBA The Peak, Stillwater, to allow a medical marijuana dispensary in the CB Commercial Business District at property addressed as 507 North Main. This is CC-19-10. Mr. Dorman, did we have good notice on this item? Yes, sir. Paula?
Yes, thank you. Once again, a dispensary asking for specific use permit approval, 507 North Main Street. This property is located in the Bradford Plaza Shopping Center. The large building to the south is Food Pyramid, and then the individual smaller units before you get to the larger superstores. The hatched area is the property within which this is proposed, and this is the front of the building. It's going into the former Papa Murphy's pizza place, and they have again met all of the requirements for the specific use permit. Be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Paula. I will open this public hearing. We have no one signed up to speak, so I will close it and ask for Planning Commission recommendation.
Planning Commission does recommend approval on a 4-0 vote.
Councilors, questions, comments, or motions?
Motion to approve the specific use permit.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to approve the permit. Please vote. With a vote of 4-1, the item is approved. Item 6D, receive public comment regarding a request for a specific use permit to allow a medical marijuana dispensary in the CG Commercial General District at property addressed at 617 East Redbud. This is CC-19-12. Mr. Dorman, did we have good notice?
Yes.
Paula?
Thank you again. And the address sort of throws everybody off until you see the map pull up. Redbud is the street to the north. Perkins is the street on the west side. So this is a little strip center at the corner of Redbud and Perkins. And this is the location of the proposed dispensary going in. And again, they've met all the requirements. Be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Paula. I will open the public hearing. We have no one signed up to speak on this item, so I will close that public hearing and ask for Planning Commission recommendation.
Planning Commission recommends approval with a 5-0 vote.
Thank you, Paula. Councilors?
Motion to approve the specific use permit at this address.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to approve item D. Please vote. With a vote of, surprisingly, 4-1, the item is approved. Thank you, Paula. It's going to be quite a bit of competition in this market in Stillwater. All right. Item 7, resolutions. Resolution number CC-2019-1, a resolution acknowledging City Council authorization and approval for the submission of an application for federal grant funding to reconstruct apron north portion at Stillwater Regional Airport through the FAA AIP grant 3-40-90-28-2019. This is item CC-19-13. Mr. McNichol.
Paul Priegel is here to answer any questions you might have about that resolution, to present information about exactly what the resolution approves.
Good evening. Just real briefly, this resolution, for those of you that have are aware of our capital planning, we have a extensive reconstruction of our apron planned. It'll be 4 phases. Our apron currently is asphalt, what we call low strength, and has a hard time with bigger aircraft. And so we have designed a 4-phase reconstruction project, and the first phase is the north face, and it will be right at the north end of the current terminal and work its way north. Subsequent years, it is planned through the FAA to have the center south and then even further south. This will obviously increase our capacity to park. It will also give us much needed relief as we're having our asphalt is about at the end of its life out there. So this would be phase 1 and just part of about a 4-year project.
Thank you. Councilors, questions?
Paul, I just wanted to get some clarification. So the Federal Aviation Administration does the 5.2 million, and then this is the portion that we're going to do. Is 5.2 just phase 1, or is 5.2 the entire cost of the 4 phases?
It is just phase 1.
Okay.
Council?
Thank you.
Thank you, Paul.
Thank you.
Further discussion or motions on this item?
Motion to adopt resolution number CC 2019-1.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to adopt the resolution. Please vote. With a vote of 5-0, the resolution is adopted. Item 8, ordinances on first reading. Ordinance number 3428, an ordinance of the City of Stillwater, Oklahoma, amending Title 37 of the Stillwater City Code, Streets, Sidewalks, and Other Public Places, by the addition of Article 5 entitled Shared Active Transportation, stating its purpose and intent, providing definitions, setting forth permitting and fee requirements, establishing shared active transportation procedures, stating parking, safety, maintenance, and operation requirements, requiring service to underserved areas of the city, setting forth data collection and reporting functions, requiring appropriate insurance and other guarantees, and allowing for termination, repealing any conflicting ordinances, and providing for severability. This is the scooter ordinance that we discussed last meeting, or meeting before last.
Yes, this is essentially the same ordinance that you saw last time, except I made the changes that you requested. I raised the number of trips per day from 3 to 4 with respect to increasing the number of deployments allowed under the ordinance. And then secondarily, I deleted the section that prohibited parking in areas where operation was prohibited. So now, even though you can't drive on the sidewalks, you could technically park on the sidewalks downtown if there was a parking facility in place.
Okay. Council, questions, comments?
Motion to advance ordinance 3428 to second reading.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to advance the ordinance to second reading. Please vote. With a vote of 5-0, the ordinance is advanced to second reading. Item B, ordinance number 3430, an ordinance related to land development in the City of Stillwater, amending Stillwater City Code, Chapter 23, titled Land Development Code, Article 25, titled Corridor Redevelopment Area, Planning District, amending Section 23441, titled Corridor Redevelopment Area Planning District, to include certain properties as more particularly described herein. Mr. Dorman.
This is the ordinance that annexes those additional properties that you discussed back at, I believe it was the last December meeting. And this will actually bring those properties into the district. The following ordinance will actually establish the transect authorization. So that's why there are 2 ordinances for this, and I'll just save you having to ask me about that when we get to the next one.
All right. Questions, councilors, or motions?
Motion to advance ordinance 3430 to second reading.
Second.
We have a motion and a second on the ordinance. Please vote. With a vote of 5-0, ordinance 3430 is advanced to second reading. Item C, ordinance 3431, an ordinance rezoning tracts of land addressed as 102, 106, 112, 114, 116, 122, and 124 South Main Street, and as more particularly described in this ordinance, from CG Commercial General to T5 Transect 5 classification. Councilors.
Motion to advance ordinance 3431 to second reading.
Second.
We have a motion and a second on the ordinance. Please vote. With a vote of 5-0, that ordinance is advanced to second reading. On second reading, item A, ordinance number 3429, an ordinance rezoning attractive land located at 1309 West University Avenue, as more particularly described in this ordinance, from RMI Residential Multifamily Intermediate to RMU Residential Multifamily Urban classification. Mr. Dorman?
No, I don't have any further comments
Okay.
on this ordinance.
This was a rezoning we approved 2 meetings ago. Councilors?
Motion to adopt ordinance number 3429.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to adopt the ordinance. Please vote. With a vote of 5-0, ordinance 3429 is adopted. All right, item 9, reports from officers and boards. Mr. Dorman.
A couple of items. Requested executive session pursuant to 25 OS subsection 307B4, confidential communication concerning a pending investigation, claim, or action titled Moore v. City of Stillwater, case number CJ 2016-497, Payne County District Court. It's my opinion that public disclosure of this matter will seriously impair the ability of the City Council to defend this litigation in the public interest. Second, request of executive session pursuant to 25 OS subsection 307B4 for confidential communication concerning a pending investigation involving Cedar Creek Farms LLC. It is my opinion that disclosure of this matter will seriously impair the ability of the City Council to conduct this investigation and or litigation that may result therefrom.
Thank you, Mr. Dorman. Mr. McNichol.
2 items, Mayor. Thank you. One, this room was full last Friday when we had a pinning ceremony for 2 27-year veterans of the Stillwater Police Department. The one was appointed Chief of Police, and that would be Jeff Watts, and the other Assistant Chief of Police, Shannon Jordan. I'd like to congratulate them, and I think they'll do a great job. Second is I'm imploring the skating community out there in Stillwater to please, please, please stay out of the new skate park until we get it finished. It hasn't been because people have been twiddling their thumbs. We've had weather delays. After weather delays, you all know how the weather has been acting lately. We need a week or two of dry weather, and we can get that thing done. But please don't go in there and tear down the fences, and please stay off the concrete. There's signs there. There's a fence all the way around it. It's pretty clear. So,
Thank you very much.
thank you.
Councilor Zanotti.
I do. The water line dead end looping project had a recent update. And for those of you who want to know what a water line dead end looping project is, it's the goal to connect dead end water lines to aid in better water quality. So contractors will return in the spring to lay sod in the areas affected by the project, but it is completed.
Thank you very much. Vice Mayor Darlington.
The library board currently has one vacancy and will have another in May. If you're interested in applying for the Stillwater Public Library Board, go online to stillwater.org and click on the Advisory Boards and Committees tab under Government. The library board is a really interesting and fun board to be on. I would highly recommend it for anyone who wants a real inside look at how city budgeting and et cetera works. Get a good way to learn the language and the culture.
Thank you. Councilor Wedlake.
Thank you, sir. Anybody heading to the farmer's market this Saturday? Look for a bright blue and white umbrella, and you will see a pop-up city hall, which means you'll be able to talk with city management and your elected officials about topics you are interested in. Curious as to why I always vote no for medical marijuana dispensaries? Come and find out on Saturday. Pop-up city hall will be at the Stillwater Farmers Market at the Prairie Arts Center this Saturday from 10 a.m. to 12 p.m. We look forward to seeing you there.
Thank you, Councilor Wedlake. Councilor Jaloski.
Yes, let us welcome 6 new city employees. Chris Novak, who's an airport operations specialist. Lonnie Pricer, who's also an airport operations specialist. Brian Hall, entry mechanic. Robert Bimby, entry maintenance worker. I hope I'm saying this right. Kyman Allender, entry maintenance worker. and Wyatt Williams, who came on board as an electric line worker apprentice.
Excellent. Welcome to the city of Stillwater. I get to deliver this week's city statistic. In the 2018 fiscal year, the Stillwater Fire Department responded to, and this, I don't know, surprises me, but responded to 5,859 incidents in a year. That's quite a bit. The fire department prides itself on its mission to respond quickly, perform professionally, and save lives and property while also showing care and compassion to our residents. Thank you to everyone at Stillwater Fire Department for the work they do. Okay, takes us down to item 11, Mr. McNichol.
Mayor, if we could, we'd like to put the appointments off until next week. We discovered late Friday after the agenda went out that there are some eligibility issues that we need to look into.
Okay, thank you.
Bring it back next week.
We will delay those for next week. I will go ahead and recess. Is that the right word? I never remember the right word. Recess the city council meeting at this time, and we will call the Stillwater Utilities Meeting Authority to order. And trustees on the consent docket of the Stillwater Utilities Authority.
Motion to approve the consent docket?
Second.
We have a motion and a second to approve the consent docket. Please vote. With a vote of 5-0, the consent docket is approved. That takes us down to item 5, general orders. Consider waiver of late fees and penalties for federal employee utility customers assessed during the recent federal government partial shutdown, and consider deferring utility bills for federal employee utility customers in case of future federal government shutdowns. Mr. McNichol.
Well, unfortunately, we couldn't get this to you before the last shutdown ended, but we also understand that there is one threatened to begin again on February 15th. There are a number of utilities around the country that have offered to furlough federal workers to allow them to defer their utility payments and or be forgiven penalty during the time of the furlough. We have looked at our terms and conditions. There is nothing there that either prohibits or permits such action. Unless the the trustees have other thoughts, we propose that we put together some short list of requirements for enabling us to do that in similar circumstances, and would ask your thoughts on that.
Okay. Trustees?
Sounds compassionate and reasonable. Do you have an estimate of how many people this might affect?
No. During the last, we were only contacted by one person, I believe, Dana, during the last shutdown. But there could be quite a few because we have USDA here. There are people attached to the university that work for the federal government. Not sure how many it is, and contrary to some belief, there is a cost of those services. But we believe that unless there's a really, really protracted furlough, that we can handle that.
Great.
So is this something that we can look forward to on an agenda like in the next week or two? How long is this?
Actually, we can handle it administratively if there is no objection.
Mm-hmm. Right.
Yeah, I mean, I think the concerns, and you guys will put together criteria, I suppose, but I mean, there are, I think, lots of folks in private settings as well that sometimes have to experience these things, and so it's I think important to make sure we're focusing on hardships created by specifically by a federal shutdown, especially those folks like at the TSA who continue to work even though they may not be getting paid during a federal shutdown. And so I would hope that those are fairly specifically and narrowly drawn to focus just on those issues. But yeah, it's absolutely I think a good thing to try to help those folks in our community who are affected.
Well, and we do have the current ability to put someone on a payment plan that's lost their job or has had a medical hardship or something along those lines, and we do that routinely. So we would structure it much in that same way.
All right, do we need a motion or an item on this, or just a,
Well, I don't know exactly what it is you're voting on, so if
Well, again, we
put
can,
these together, if they need to come back, then I'll put them on the agenda next
Okay.
week.
all right. Well, that takes us to reports from officers and boards. Mr. Dorman,
Nothing to report, sir.
Mr. Minicle,
no items, sir.
trustees,
No item?
Sure.
is there a motion to adjourn the Stillwater Utilities Authority meeting?
Motion to adjourn?
Second.
We have a motion and a second to adjourn the Utilities Authority. Please vote. With a vote of 5-0, Utilities Authority is now adjourned. Okay, that takes us to the Stillwater Economic Development Authority meeting, which I assume is why you are all here. Usually people leave by now. I will call this meeting to order. And I will ask the trustees for any questions, comments, or motions on the consent docket.
Motion to approve the consent docket?
Second.
We have a motion and a second to approve the consent docket. Please vote. With a vote of 5-0, the consent docket is approved. All right, that takes us to public comment on agenda items not scheduled for public hearing. We do have a number of folks signed up for this. I will remind everyone that please state your name and your address for the record when you come to speak. Please also keep in mind that you have 3 minutes for your comments on the agenda items that you're here to speak about. There will be a clock on the wall. We do have a number of folks here, so please mind the time. First name on my list is Michael Davis.
Thank you, Mayor. Michael Davis, 2602 North Park Drive. And that's Stillwater 74075. And I stand to support the folks we call Visit Stillwater. What follows are images left in the minds of many. We're concerned about our city's future. For example, based on the evidence collected, it's a no-brainer to hire Visit Stillwater on a long-term agreement. That is an image in the mind of many, and it's good for business. Why? A reasonable person may ask. Because long-term is obviously cost-effective, more so than the micromanaged seasonal arrangement that we have now. For an example, had a long-term agreement been applied to the current arrangement, then Winter Wonderland would have enjoyed the success of cooperative weather patterns and a fine-tuned execution. Having been slated long-term, that's cost-effective. Let's be fair, though. The previous Winter Wonderland was not a failure. It not only broke even with funds to spare, additionally, Visit Stillwater met the contractual agreements to establish a productive record. Despite constant challenges, that is performance at distinctive levels. I would like to publicly say at this time to thank Visit Stillwater for faithfully serving our community, because they have. However, our relationship appears to be hung up on a peg called productivity matrix, and converting relevant activity into that productivity matrix. The above-mentioned concepts are taken from the handbook entitled Destination Marketing Organizations Performance Reporting, published some 10, 11 years ago. This handbook, however, as written, is so written to encourage subsequent DMOs and their clients to define productivity matrix through a collaborative effort. This is a rare opportunity. Corporate world does not ask your opinion. They tell you either do it or you don't. Here we have a rare opportunity for city government and Visit Stillwater to define what they mean. In other words, the handbook is not outdated. It offers room to grow and to create through a collaborative definition of DMO matrix. That collaborative definition is essential for success. Therefore, bang for the buck, our mayor's favorite statement, must be defined by a collaborative effort. That means City of Stillwater and Visit Stillwater must define productivity matrix together.
Thank you, Mr.
Further,
Davis.
converting relevant activity into that matrix is also a collaborative definition.
Thank you, Mr.
Now that
Davis.
we're all on the same page, let's get to the rhythm and business.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, sir.
All right, I will, just for the sake of the meeting tonight, the agenda item that we're discussing here is Visit Stillwater's response to January 7, 2019 Economic Development Authority report on Visit Stillwater financial performance. We do have to limit the comments to the agenda item. It's not a broad agenda item of whether Visit Stillwater is the right entity for this job. It's actually a pretty specific agenda item. And so because of Oklahoma open meeting laws, we can't get into discussion beyond the agenda item. So I would ask for those of you that are speaking to please limit your comments to the actual agenda item and not to a broader discussion, again, because of the way the open meeting laws work. So with that said, Mr. Norris, Chris Norris, you're next.
Chris Norris, 3104 South Deer Creek. I hope I'm being specific, Mayor. I do want to thank, I am a board member of Visit Stillwater, and I do want to begin with thanking the counselors and the staff that have met with me and have been very receptive, very accommodating. We have met at 7 in the morning, we have met at noon, we have met at 6 p.m., and I want to thank you for that. And there was never any hassle or any problem with getting an audience with one of you. What I was going to talk about is I was on the Visit Stillwater, or Convention Visitors Bureau board back in the late 90s, early 2000s. Our budget at that time was in the $300,000 to $350,000 area, and back then we were given the amount from the hotel tax, less than 1%, that the city used to do the administrative work for us. And I think last year the hotel tax brought in around $849,000. So I think the successes that we've had as a group have been almost threefold on what we began 20 years ago that I was involved in. I'm slated to be the new chairman as of July 1st, 2019. I want to talk a wee bit about, some of y'all know me, I had a retail store for 30 years down on Campus Corner called Chris's University Spirit. I want to talk on the sales tax side of this. I saw numerous groups that came in, especially during the summer, that would help fill up dorms and hotels that spent money on sales tax in my store. So I think that was very important, and I think that's, I know we're very adamant about an ROI, and I think that's accurate, but I think these things get a little convoluted when you talk about a hotel tax versus sales tax. I do want to mention, it was funny when I had my 30th anniversary in September 1st of 2016, I did contact Visit Stillwater and ask for help from them for that anniversary on that particular day. And with the one phone call I was able to get on the Morning Scramble with Steve Daniels, I was on TV 31. I had numerous advertising things through the social media of Visit Stillwater. And to give you an idea, the sales tax normally generated on a Thursday in September was $400, and on this day we generated around $3,500 of sales tax from sales. So anyway, thank you for your time.
Thanks,
Appreciate
Chris.
it.
Thank you. John Killam.
John Killam, 1024 South Woodcrest Drive. Thank you all for letting me speak this evening. I just wanted to let you guys know, as a representative of Eskimo Joe's, how much we have partnered with the CBB. So I realize this is supposed to be talking about finance. So what we've done with them is when they have called to ask about they're wanting to have the state high school football championship here and we can get the OSU stadium if we can raise enough money amongst businesses in town. So not only are they spending the money that you give them through the hotel tax, but they're also collecting money from retailers and other interested parties in town. So it's not just using the tax that you guys collect. We also split the visitor's bag with this organization. The reason we do that is because we know it's going directly to someone who's going to be in town, who's new to our community, who is going to be looking for somewhere to spend their money. So on the SAC, one side of the SAC is the Convention and Visitors Bureau information, on the other side is our information. We have found that, well, I'll just put it this way. We have an edict from our owner that if Christie or the CVB asks us for anything, our answer is yes, because they are providing such a great resource to our community. So regardless of where they're getting the money from your side, I know businesses in town are more than willing to jump on board because they've seen the benefits and have experienced the increased sales that Chris was talking about. So I appreciate your time. I would just say that our DMO is extremely well respected around the state. I think about Leadership Stillwater and the fact that the DMO's chief executive, I think, sat on the committee that organized that and brought it to Stillwater for 21 years. When that person dropped off and quit organizing it, we haven't hosted a Leadership Stillwater since then. So for the last 2 years, we haven't hosted that event, which to me is people from around the state coming to Stillwater to learn about our community, which will only bring more events to Stillwater. So thank you very much.
Thank you, John. Ivel Gregory.
Pardon me. I am Ivel Gregory. I live at 923 South Pine. I originally was going to speak about the history of Visit Stillwater and how it has dovetailed into the community, but City Attorney Dorman did a really good job of that the last meeting. So I'd like to talk about some of the history that he didn't talk about. And that is that when that ordinance was passed, the community and our society was in a kinder, gentler place. At that time, there was a committee of 88 civic leaders who supported the event, and it was successfully passed. And at that time, those who sat behind that counter that you guys sit behind now, or whatever you call it, they didn't conduct investigations. They had study sessions. And when they wanted to know about something that was happening in the community, whether it was related to government or whether it wasn't, they would call the folks involved to an open meeting where there was give and take on both sides. And that meeting was, the public, the general public could attend those meetings. And it's really kind of surprised me. I'm confident that there are people on staff that are as old as I am, as experienced as I am, they may not be as old as I am, that would probably remember that facility. Okay, but now I understand that we go into an executive session to discuss things, and part of that description of the executive session uses a word called investigation. That's not a friendly term. That's not a transparent term. That's not a direction I believe those of you who have been elected by our community want to work under. So I would suggest that maybe time could be spent with communication, with not only Visit Stillwater, but the other public-private groups that you're going to have to deal with before long. Because I'm confident that you all want to play on a level playing field, and so I think that probably everyone else who fits that need or in that place is looking forward to being investigated. Why don't they look forward to a study session where you can have an open dialogue and allow the public to view it and offer input as well. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Mr. Gregory. Jan Harris.
I'm Jan Harris. I live at 8601 North Perkins Road. I've been a member of the Stillwater hotel industry for over 25 years. I've served at different times on the VASE board, the CVB board, and the Visit Stillwater board. I've seen a lot of changes in the industry as well as the city of Stillwater. Under our current leadership, we have gone from reactivity to proactivity when we're marketing and selling Stillwater. As a hotelier, the city's RFQ didn't include any specifications for actually selling Stillwater and hotel room nights, which is the mechanism for which the tax was collected. Selling Stillwater is very much a relationship-based process. The process is clearly much more successful with a long-term invested team of individuals. The hoteliers and voters in Stillwater passed the hotel tax to fund an organization to promote and sell the community to our visitors. This organization, Visit Stillwater, has been instrumental in creating an environment for growth. Over the past 20 years, we've grown from 9 hotels to 19. We've gone from $155,000 a year to almost $850,000. The hotel tax was not passed to fund the Chamber of Commerce or the City of Stillwater. It was passed to fund an organization to promote and market the City of Stillwater to visitors. As Calvin Anthony, mayor at the time of the ordinance, stated in his letter, if Visit Stillwater no longer exists, then we don't need this hotel tax. Thank you.
Thank you. Colin Campbell.
My name's Colin Campbell. Address 100 South Buckingham Road, Stillwater, Oklahoma, 74075. I am the director of the Expo Center, and I understand that the Expo Center is outside the city limits, but when we hold events, where do these people stay? Where do they eat? Where do they shop? I want to make sure there is not a misunderstanding of what the Expo Center brings to the table when it comes to bringing in revenue to the city and county. Over the past 20 years, the Expo Center and Visit Stillwater have worked together to grow as a team and to support event coordinators and meeting planners in bringing their state, regional, and national events to the Expo Center and the Stillwater community. When working with groups, Visit Stillwater is our first phone call before we even set an event's date, because we need to know what other events are happening in town, and we know that Visit Stillwater always has that information. I also know we are not the only entity that utilizes them for their knowledge of what's going on in our community. Once a date is selected, many of our events last multiple days, and participants spend a majority of their money inside Stillwater city limits on goods and services. These visitors are not coming to town from 8 a.m. to 6 p.m. and then leaving. They stay for multiple days. Purchase resources directly from Stillwater businesses. For example, after the Cowboys Stampede one year, the college rodeo, I had people coming up to me and asking what was going on last weekend at the expo. When I asked them why, they said they noticed pickups and horse trailers all over town at the convenience stores, restaurants, and hotels. I remind them that when you have an event with over 450 contestants at a college rodeo, they all have to eat, fill up, and stay somewhere. While this is just one example, there are events happening every week at the Expo Center that have a direct economic impact on Stillwater. One of the biggest assets of working with Visit Stillwater are their relationships with organizations that we can't reach. Through their contacts in the meeting and tourism industry, they're able to encourage groups to host their events in town and at the Expo Center and build relationships from these interactions. The relationships are created by working closely with Visit Stillwater and our clients, meaning they are more than likely going to come back to Stillwater on a regular basis. Having been in sales throughout my life, I've learned that building relationships is a key to both new and repeat business. When you have gained someone's trust as a reliable and knowledgeable source, they will want to come back again. While you can't put an ROI on relationships, Visit Stillwater and Expo Center work closely to build and maintain relationships with event planners all over the country to keep events scheduled throughout the year for both the county and Stillwater's economy. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Randy Murray.
Mayor, councilors, city manager. I'm Randy Murray. I live at 2905 Quail Ridge Street. I was just sitting there thinking, I've lived in Stillwater for 60 years. 60 years ago in March, my father moved our family to Stillwater, so I've been here a while. I've seen a lot of things. For 25 years, I practiced accounting here in Stillwater on Main Street. My area of practice dealt with valuation and managerial accounting. Retired some years ago and found myself in a second career teaching the things that I did for 25 years. Professor of accounting at Oklahoma City University, where I teach managerial accounting to the MBA students, and I teach audit to undergraduates and audit concept, policy, and practice to the graduate students. Valuation has been a major part of my professional career, and it tends to still be a part of it as I teach it with all the experiences and adventures that I've had in it. As I've listened to the YouTube of the meetings, and I've read the articles in the newspaper, to me it's a very simple problem we have. It's not the I guesses and I think and I feel, it's the what do the numbers say. And the problem is we don't have a system to do evaluation. With all the CPAs and accountants we seem to have looking at all this, I wonder, why are we not talking about bringing a system of valuation up and putting it into place and then putting it together? What makes this hard, evaluating the visitors center, is, and I fall back on previous Mayor Calvin Anthony's letter to the editor in the news press, is there's so many avenues of service that the visitor center provides. They provide the direct service of going out and getting activities and meetings that we can measure that success, but they provide so many ancillary services, such as providing manpower and volunteers and providing activities that may not have a direct relationship. They have a visitor center where people will come in, and so those have an indirect impact on the activities that they may not bring in, but they have value. And we would have to determine what that value would be. And it can be done, it is done, and fortunately we have here, did I run out of time?
You did, but finish your thought.
Fortunately, we have an economic center at OSU that this would make a great project to develop the econometrics that a graduate student, it's not a PhD quality, but a graduate student could develop those and then over time tweak it. My concern is business prudence tells us not to do anything till we have the numbers, so that we're not guessing, we're not thinking, we don't have that gut feeling. We have the numbers that tell us to make that decision. Thank you very much. And I did fill out 3 of those forms, so I had not.
He wanted 9 minutes for you.
Thank you, Mr. Murray. I don't have any further forms. Was there anybody else out there who thought they'd signed up to speak? All right. Thank you all for being here, and thank you for your comments. We appreciate it. That does take us down to item 5, general orders. Item A, Visit Stillwater response to January 7, 2019 Visit Stillwater Economic Development Authority report on Visit Stillwater financial performance. Mr. McNichol.
Well, if Mr. Baker will bear with us for just a minute, Melissa Reams is going to make a couple of clarifications to the report given last week, and then Mr. Baker can have the floor, Mayor.
Thank you.
Good evening, trustees. Melissa Reams, Chief Financial Officer, and I'm here this evening to provide a couple of clarification to a couple of points that were brought up during our January 7th report. Staff presented to the trustees findings from the agreed-upon procedures examination that indicated there was a fund balance. And in the report that we delivered, we described that fund balance as undisclosed. Visit Stillwater does have a local CPA firm prepare monthly compiled financial statements, and that fund balance is disclosed to the reader of those financial statements on the face of those statements. When we referred to this as undisclosed, we were talking about this body, the trustees and the staff of the city and of SEDA, that we were not aware of the fund balance at that point in time.
Because we didn't have copies of those compiled reports?
Correct,
Okay.
correct.
Who generally gets those reports?
It would be the board of Visit Stillwater. And anybody, I mean, when we asked for them, they were very prompt in delivering those to us. Secondly, I mentioned a 30-day opt-out clause, and it was brought to my attention that in this particular agreement, there is an elongated process for this board to opt out of that particular contract. So you would have to issue a 15-day written notification to the Board of Directors for Visit Stillwater, and then there would be a 60-day correction period. You would meet, develop an action plan, and then there would be a 60-day period for corrections to occur. So at a minimum, that would be a 75-day correction period or opt-out period at that point. Any questions?
Just one on one of the public comments that was made regarding the idea of investigation versus study session. Correct me if I'm wrong. I mean, part of the reason for that is to discuss some of these financial matters which are of a private organization, not in a full public setting because of the private nature of the contract and of the business itself, correct?
Yes, I would agree with that. And City Attorney Dorman can chime in here, but I think that is the wording, is it not, when you call for a executive session?
That's the wording that the statute uses.
Right.
Yeah. So our discussion has to, because that's the statutory authority we have for that.
That's the statutory authority that we use, and without disclosing anything that was discussed, there were other reasons that had to be disclosed to the council.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
Further? Great. Mr. Baker.
Good evening, trustees. Willie Baker, 1401 South Culpeper, and I am here to deliver a response to the report that you received January 7. I do appreciate, as Mayor indicated, those folks who came tonight and spoke, and I think they had, a lot of them had some good points, good things to consider.
Mr. Baker?
Yes.
I'm sorry, before you get started, do you have a written copy of it, or did we, I didn't?
No, I don't.
Okay, that's fine.
And one reason, quite frankly, is we didn't know what the retractions were going to be.
Sure, that's fine. I
didn't want to put.
wanted to follow along if I could.
Okay, I understand. Mark Gunkel is our CPA, and I'm going to make some comments, and then he will, if you permit, he will finish up our report, or our response to the report. And there's no reason to go back over a lot of the history of Visit Stillwater, other than just to briefly say it was created 33 years ago by an ordinance passed by the citizens of this community, and as a part of that, a board or advisory committee was established to oversee that. And as we all know, it started out as a contracted for service with the Chamber of Commerce, and that continued for a number of years. John Killam was active at that time, and as was Chris Norris. Jan was on there. I mean, there have been several people who served off and on during that time frame. There's always been some issue with how the funds get spent. I mean, it doesn't matter who it is. When it was with Chamber of Commerce, there were issues. When it was with the city, there were issues. And now, of course, there are issues. So it's not something new, and it usually does revolve about the money side of it. I was actually on the opposite side of whether it should be separated from the chamber because I was on the chamber board at that time. So, however, I did not come to speak against it. Felt like we had all good people on both sides and we could work something out, and something good did happen eventually. It ended up as it has. So, our funding, as again, everyone knows this by now, but just saying it for the record, so to speak, our funding is from a dedicated tax, and so we are a little different than any other public-private partnership that you deal with. That may or may not make a difference to you, but it is a fact that we are a little different animal. Visit Stillwater has been functioning since January 1 of 2015, and the reason we were created, it wasn't something that we initiated the idea. The idea came from then city manager Dan Galloway. Now we did, after we discussed it as then an advisory board, we embraced it at some point and decided that made sense. That's the way to go. We were able to see that there are other communities that were using DMOs, and that it seemed to be working well and was very effective. So we began on that course, and since that time we've done a lot of things. The mayor has mentioned before that times change, and we do understand that, and we understand that what we agreed upon with the city, SEDA, in 2015 as far as a contract, that some of the things that are in there may not be what this present Board of Trustees wants to have, or you may want something different. You may want more, and we're open to that discussion. I appreciate Melissa coming up and making those clarifications. I want to point out again, though, that what is in our contract, we fully met all of the requirements of our contract. There's nothing in that agreed upon procedures that would indicate that we failed to do something that we contracted to do. And not only that, but we were within the spirit of the law too, if you will. On providing the financial reports, we had a discussion in 2015 with members of the city staff, the administration, about what type of reports should be provided. Initially, I assumed, and I'm not much on the accounting side, but I assumed we would provide financial reports. But the input we got, or response we got, is that those were not things that they necessarily wanted to see, because once the funds were paid over to the Visit Stillwater, they're no longer public funds. It's no different than you hiring a contractor to build a building for you, or construct something else, or buying goods. You pay the money, and the money goes into that company's coffers, and that's where it is now. It's no longer public funds. Now, we probably complicated this a little bit because in our accounting, not thinking ahead to how things are going to come down in 2018, designating funds as public and private became somewhat of an issue, at least in some corners. It really should probably be more properly called perhaps contract and non-contracted funds. But we don't have public funds, and I don't know if John Dorman will remember this, but we had this discussion probably 3 or 4 years ago that just about that topic. But again, it wasn't a point of contention at that time. We have basically in the reports we provide, which are required under our contract, we have provided all the information. And as Melissa said, when we were asked to provide additional reports, we did do that. And fully detailed reports. We've never hidden anything. I think that's why some are concerned, frustrated perhaps with the notion that there's an investigation, which to some implies there's something wrong that's been done. That's what we typically think. Somebody did something wrong, they didn't use that money properly, but there's no evidence of that, and quite frankly, there hasn't been anything of that nature occur while this is Visit Stillwater's been functioning. We have gotten, over the last 4 years, we've tried to develop, not tried, we've begun to use and develop new ways to work with our clients and with our partners. client-wise, really, the City of Stillwater is our client. We have a contract with you to provide services, and we do want to satisfy you. And I've had that conversation with the mayor before, and with Norman and with Melissa. We're in this to try to please and to make sure we do exactly what it is that we contract for, which will be something that presently is in the contract we have. In any future contract, it would obviously be something to negotiate. I appreciate Mr. Murray's comments about, I took it as how simple this is going to be to figure out how to measure our return.
It'll take a little longer.
But be that as it may, we're just not the type of organization that I think you can apply a certain model to and say, this is going to generate a very accurate report on return on investment. And it's been mentioned by several speakers, the primary reason why I don't think that'll happen, and that's because we work off of relationships. The relationships we have with the city, with organizations throughout the city, the county, the state, and it's not just the people here, obviously, it's the relationships we build with the organizations that bring events to this town. You know, our mission is not to organize an event. Our mission is to be available to work with people who are interested in coming to Stillwater, to reach out to those who might have an interest in coming to Stillwater, but we don't plan the event for them. You know, if it's an annual meeting of some sort, that's whatever their agenda is, and we're there to help facilitate that. When we get a call or an inquiry, we have an application form that gets filled out. If it's a new event, they'll most likely be asking for a visitor development incentive grant, long-term, for just provide us with some money so we can bring this event to Stillwater. And we have them give us quite a bit of information about how many room nights they anticipate, how many people will attend, how long the event's going to be, where is it going to be held, is there any special needs for the particular event. And then we coordinate with our hotel partners, and it just goes from there. We have an excellent staff. I know most of you are acquainted with Christy. Two of our staff members are here tonight, Nicole Horn and Jessica Kincannon, and they could tell you a lot more about how this all works and how many calls and emails and whatever else they do to maintain these relationships occur on a day or on a weekly basis. But again, the point is relationships are a big, big part of what a destination marketing organization does. If you don't have the relationships, you may have a lot of other things. You may have facilities, you may have more than adequate hotels, but you may not have the ability to bring that event to this community. I mentioned the grants, and I'll just say one other thing on that. When we make a grant, we get a request, and maybe they ask for $5,000. They give us an entire budget. We look at that, try to figure out how much they really need, or how much, maybe we can fund this or provide for this particular organization. Once we do that, though, it's with the understanding we don't intend to do that forever with that same organization. Our goal is to basically give them some seed money, get them here, help them, show them what we can do and what the community can do. And then if they come back and ask for money again, I don't recall any in the last 4 years where we haven't cut it down, if in fact we gave money. And staff really drives that, and usually has some pretty good insight about whether they really need that money in order to come or not, and we try to work with that and to provide the funds as we can. We have given in the range, as far as grants go, in the range of, I think it's in some of the report that Melissa provided, but it's, I think anywhere from 30, maybe 38,000 was the least, and maybe in the mid-50s on a yearly basis is the amount. We may have, as far as the number of events, and again, I'm getting in dangerous territory, and Jessica or Nicole would probably be better at this, but in 3 years, we worked with 360 plus groups, just to give you an idea how many different groups we work with on all types of events. And some are not big deals, so to speak. Some are not going to be a lot of overnights or room nights, but some are. As Colin Campbell mentioned, some of the events they have at the Expo Center may last all week. Or you'll have people who come in for the prep time. get ready for their event, and then the actual competition occurs after that. So we work with an awful lot of people on a regular basis, a daily basis, and it's these relationships that make it all work. We, a lot of things have been said about Visit Stillwater, and some have been very good, and some have been critical. And I know the mayor provided a letter to the editor, and we responded to that as a board. And I'm not going to rehash those things. Our belief is that the things that we need to concern ourselves with that are addressed in the report of January 7 are how to make sure that this board receives all the information that you need so you can evaluate us, and we need to work together, as Mr. Murray suggested, to develop whatever system it is to give you the information you want. In talking with Norman and Melissa, we've talked about perhaps providing more information on a regular basis of how many events we try to get here and how many actually come, so you'd have some kind of success rate to look at. I can tell you this one statistic they threw at me, which, again, they'd be better at it than I would, but of the groups we worked with in the last 3 years, we had something like 36,000 total room nights that would have been used if all those events occurred as planned. And we ended up with 20,000 of those being actually booked. So that's a 57% success rate in that regard. If that's a measurement that matters. I don't know if it does or doesn't. To me, it translates into an awful lot of money that was spent in the city of Stillwater, regardless of whether the event's in the city or outside somewhere in the county, like Payne County Expo. We're tracking those kind of things. We have a system that we're using as part of our marketing program that is helping us do a better job, perhaps, of tracking that. I do want to mention just two other things that, not saying they'll be the only other things I say, but two things. And one is on the reserve, as Melissa mentioned, it was not undisclosed. It is that the reports that have that information in them were not provided because the contract didn't call for it. And again, we've never refused to provide them. So I hope no one today or after tonight would in any sense think that that's a failure on the part of Visit Stillwater. The idea of creating a reserve is something we discussed at one of our earliest board meetings after we were formed, and it came up as part of just what do we need to do in order to be really financially prepared for whatever may happen down the road. And the idea, of course, would be if there was a sudden downturn in the economy, God forbid, some disaster or catastrophe that occurred and hotels were destroyed or not able to operate, the tax goes down, we'd have somewhat of a reserve. We could continue to operate for some period of time, albeit it'd be on a scaled-down basis, but still we'd be able to continue to work. And frankly, the idea of having a reserve seemed to me and to other board members to be reinforced by the fact that the city had been able to establish a reserve from the funds. And at the time we were formed, there was somewhere close to $1 million in reserve from the hotel room tax that had not been part of any contracts or dealings with the Visit Stillwater or its predecessors, I should say. As a board, we believe and stand by that decision to create a reserve. We don't see anything wrong with that. There was also discussion after, it wasn't in the report itself, but in the discussion that occurred on January 7, there was mention made about our incentive pay or bonuses and the methodology that we used. And I think in hindsight, sure, I can stand here today and say we could have surely we could have figured out a better way to describe that and to just to present it. We didn't. Again, hindsight's a great teacher. And so today we know that there are different ways that you can approach those kind of things, and certainly by doing so would have taken all the concern, I think, or taken a lot of the concern away. But we also stand by payment of incentive payments to our employees. These folks do a great job, as I mentioned. They're working with these events. Events don't happen 8 to 5 or 9 to 4 or 5, whatever hours might otherwise be expected. They happen typically after 5. They happen on weekends. And our staff goes to those events to coordinate and to help make sure things are going and working the way they should be. So in that regard, again, we stand by that as something we believe to be a sound practice and one that helps us maintain morale and to provide the services that we need to provide. When I spoke at on that night, January 7, that was part of the comments on items that were not scheduled for public comment, and I mentioned that we were concerned about our ability to communicate with staff and to try to work issues out. And given that we're still under a contract that runs to June 30, I think that's important. And I'm really pleased to say that we've had 2 meetings since January 7, and in my opinion, both meetings have been very helpful and very productive. We've exchanged thoughts or ideas on things that we can do, other information we might be able to provide that will better meet the needs of the city and the staff so they can evaluate what we do. Our overall goal as a board is to meet the mission and goals and purposes of Visit Stillwater, which is to promote this community through tourism development. We're a board like many other boards for nonprofits throughout this city. Everybody's volunteer. We put our time in, just like all of you have served on boards. Some still do. And you certainly spend a lot of time on this particular board and the city council. So we all know that's just part of the deal if you're going to be an active member, productive member of a community, and we're glad to do it. But we're committed to doing everything we can to fulfill our contract with the city, and we embrace the idea of working with the city to do a better job and to meet any expectations we have not met. Again, with the communications that we think we can continue to have, I think we can come up with some ways that we might be able to give you more information about what Visit Stillwater really does bring to the table. And again, with Mr. Murray's help, since he sounds like he's volunteered to be on some type of study group, that we would be able to perhaps come up with a different way to measure. I would like to call on Mark Gunkel to come up, but I'd be happy to answer any questions first.
Trustees, any questions for Mr. Baker? I do have one. Or go ahead, John.
Oh, no, go ahead.
So you mentioned that under the service contract, once the funds are paid over to Visit Stillwater, it's basically treated like any other private service contract we have. We pay engineers to do engineering service, that sort of thing. You also mentioned, though, that it's a different sort of an animal because you all are funded by a dedicated tax. And it's difficult. I would be interested to hear your take on how you feel, if you feel like you're funded by a dedicated tax, where does it change from public money to private money, and how do you, just as a board member, how does your board sort of see that juxtaposition of being funded by public taxes but also receiving private funds?
Well, I think that very question goes back to what I said earlier about how we set it up even in our accounting. We showed it as public and private funds because we're all thinking these are tax dollars we're getting from a dedicated source of funding for this particular activity. So that is, I think, where we all start. But from a legal standpoint, contractual standpoint, once we're paid the money, they're no longer public funds. I mean, they lose that identity. As you just said, if you pay a contractor for materials or for work done, they can spend it any way they want to. And that comment leads back to, that's why I don't think the city necessarily cared about getting our financials, because once that money came in our coffers, it's up to us to spend it in a way that meets the needs or the requirements of our contract. And I know it's not your desire nor city staff to micromanage any private partnership that you have. But I think it is something you start out exactly where you are with the question you asked. But I think from a legal standpoint, once we're paid that money, it's no longer public funds. I don't know if that helps or not.
Well, I guess, then my question for you would be, if, from my standpoint, sitting here, should we as a board adopt that same outlook where we say, oh, well, I guess we paid them their contract funds. They're no longer the funds aren't ours to worry about anymore. So
Absolutely not. I don't think that for 1 second.
Okay.
I don't have a problem with having the agreed-upon procedures. I'm like everybody else. I don't like the term investigation into what we do just because of the connotation that carries. But otherwise, I've said this before, I have no quarrel. The board has no quarrel with the idea that this board of trustees or the council, whichever, wants to have accountability and wants to know how the funds are being spent. You know, what's going on. We get that. And that's why we immediately provided those reports.
Thank you.
I would say too, I think I disagree in that, and with other contractors and things, if we're working with an engineering company designing a road using public funds, they're invoicing us monthly for the work that they're doing to show progress. And so it's not that we've just handed over funds that we no longer are tracking as public dollars. I think we very much are tracking those as public dollars still, in terms of accountability to those funds.
Is that a question?
No, I just, I guess I don't understand. I mean, it's not like we're just, I guess I disagree that it's something that all of a sudden becomes private because we've given them to somebody to provide services. I guess I don't understand how you derive that from I mean, if we look at it in terms of other contracts that we do, we are continually tracking those dollars through invoicing and things like that.
And that's all established by contract.
Sure.
You make an agreement. And I'm not hiding behind the contract we have, because I think when we formulated a contract in 2015, we actually began in 2014, we had a number of drafts, went back and forth, got it done in 2015. We all, I think at that time, thought, okay, this model will work. This is what the city appears to need. This is what we'll have and make available. But again, as I said to the mayor, I'm not saying that accountability is not still part of the process. That's why I say I think it was a no-brainer for us when we're asked to provide financials. We're going to provide the financials. We have just never refused to do that. It's never been an issue. The way, just a suggestion, I mean, presently the way it's set up, we're paid on a quarterly basis, and an invoice, I sign an invoice, or somebody on behalf of the board signs the invoice, or the non-collusion agreement, or whatever it is, John. I guess I signed blindly, but I sign that, and it goes through, and the money comes over. And maybe there's another way to do it that would provide more information, and as a board, then this group could look at it and say, well, are they doing what they should be doing? Is this, what we're supposed to pay them? I still will take the position, though, at the end of the day, it's a very different organization. I've used the comparison to other contractors, but it is a very different organization because we provide so much in the way of personal services and relationships that are ongoing.
Trustees, anything else for Mr. Baker? Thank you.
Mark Dunkel, 3907 Eagle Creek Avenue. Just wanted to address a few items. My firm provides accounting services for Visit Stillwater. We have since they began in January of 2015. I want to address the issue about the financial statements and them being provided, and yes, we provided them upon request, as that's been discussed, and the board did approve at the last board meeting to provide them to SEDA staff, the city, and how that funnels down to the trustees after every board meeting that the board approves. So those will be, forthcoming. So that action has been taken. So just wanted to clear that up and find that. Hope you'll find that meaningful. I just want to address a couple of things that there was the agreed upon procedures audit that was conducted, as well as the additional steps that the city staff performed and the findings in the memo on January 7th, both of which were kind of, the purpose was stated to determine the ROI of the hotel tax and to get a clear indication of how the funds were spent to achieve visitor development. And I don't know, just typically audits are not going to give you a true return on investment, especially in this kind of scenario. So I get, some of the mantra tonight has been, let's find an agreeable metric that we can all agree upon, that we can develop, that we can clearly measure this. And I think that's out on the table for discussion. And I know Visit Stillwater is agreeable to that, and defining what that is from just something that would be that we can easily come up with from the data that we have to equate to an ability to let the council make decisions upon that. I will state that in one of the findings in the agreed upon procedures talked about, and I'm going to quote this from page 13 of the agreed upon procedure, says utilizing metrics such as sales tax trends or collection of hotel motel tax are not ideal and could result in very incorrect or misleading conclusions because of the difficulty in isolating just the impacts of these types of efforts, because there's other factors that play into that, such as other local and national trends that may play into sales tax measurement. And then, however, in the report in the memo of January 7th, the conclusion was that presently the only available indicators of enhanced visitor development of spending are changes in sales and hotel tax. These revenue sources have remained constant or consistent over the review period, and any variation may be attributed to sources other than Visit Stillwater activity. Just two different kind of angles. One stating that it's hard to use sales tax as a trend, the other saying that that's the only. I think it just comes back to just an overall kind of plea that we can find an agreeable measure that we can both be happy with. I mean, not happy with, but that's meaningful, I should say. And then I guess just kind of one of the final things I wanted to state here, the agreed upon procedures report, anytime these kinds of things are performed, I would want to look and see what can we take from this? What are some things that we can do better? And we are in the process of updating procedure policies, things that were addressed in the agreed upon procedures, including a reserve policy, the employee bonus structure, a capitalization policy, tracking mechanism for valuation of in-kind items, expense reports, use of credit cards. So just updating our policies and procedures. So it's, that's just kind of a fruit that comes from, just somebody giving a second look at this. So I take that as just what can we do better, and that's something that we want to do.
Sure.
So those were the main items I had, and I appreciate your time.
Mm-hmm. Trustees, any questions for Mr. Gunkel? I have a couple. You want to go?
No, go ahead. I was just going to say thank you.
Well, you mentioned that you're talking about revising or working on some of those policies, like the reserve policy, that sort of thing. Is there an adopted written reserve policy currently?
I don't know that there currently is, but it's definitely been on the board's radar to have. I mean, it's been an important thing, and the Visit Stillwater is in the process of an accreditation policy or accreditation process right now, and that is something that's required as well.
Okay, we did receive, and we talked, it's been mentioned, reports we do receive or reports we don't, or reports we need to ask for, or, that sort of thing, which has all been a learning process, certainly for me. We did receive an itemized budget from Visit Stillwater staff, I think in March. It was on a memo that they submitted to us. It was described as an itemized budget. I think it even said approved July 1, 2017. Okay. I don't know if that's an accounting document that you all produce, or if that's a board approval, or what that approved means.
The board would have approved that. We assist with preparation of that, and the board is presented to the board, and they approve it.
So it showed spending, a yearly budget of spending for about $941,000 on that itemized budget that we received. But there wasn't a line item in that budget of any sort of reserve being kept out of that money. And so I'm just wondering if there isn't a reserve policy or written policy, how would Visit Stillwater determine how much of that $941,000 was actually being reserved if it wasn't actually in the budget? And so my question, I guess, is just, if there was a reserve policy and if it was sort of disclosed, why wouldn't it have shown up in a budget of how the spending is actually being done?
like a dedicated amount to be attributed
I mean,
to reserve?
I would assume with a reserve policy, there's some sort of 10% of annual spend that's put in reserve, or some indication if there's extra, then it will be. But this showed a deficit spending, and it didn't show any sort of reserve funding being kept out. And I guess I was confused because it indicated that there was a policy of keeping a reserve, but the budget that was submitted didn't show any reserve actually being kept out of the budget.
A dedicated amount. I understand. And I know it's been the goal of the Visit Stillwater Board to have 1 year's worth of operations in a reserve, just for that reason. I don't know that an official reserve policy has been adopted, obviously. I mean, just to address that, the budget is designed as being very aggressive on expenditures, and just thinking worst case scenario and hoping you can come under that, and you know, with our known revenue source. Of course, that's, you know, our contractual agreement with the city.
Okay. I think that's all I have. Thank you. All right, well, we appreciate, sure.
Just on what you just asked Mark about the reserve, we approved financial reports that show the reserve in it as a board. So it's not, it was discussed at a board meeting, I'm going to say in 2015, early 2015, as far as a very formal policy, how much to put in at a time. I don't think that's probably there. I'm not certain. I haven't gone back and looked, frankly.
So I mean, that's, I guess what I'm confused about is that if there was approved financial reports showing a reserve fund, and then when a budget is submitted to this board to say, basically it was in the form of a memo requesting additional funding, and here's a list of how we're spending all of our money this year, and it didn't show you saving any money. To me, that it's confusing if you all had financial reports that said we're saving money, but then when you show us the numbers, you don't show us saving any money. That's the part that, for me, it's difficult to understand why it would be in some financial reports but not in some others.
Well, again, not being an accountant, I don't know what goes in a certain type of report and what doesn't, but I do know that on a monthly meeting, we receive reports.
Sure.
Not all of them have the reserve shown in it. I don't think anybody's hiding anything.
No,
it is on the sheet. It shows a reserve.
Okay.
And I'll just thinking a little bit more about that. The budget that you're referring to, it simply showed the anticipated revenue and anticipated expenditures, not a cash position beginning, cash position ending. I mean, that's how I see a budget is simply that. It's what do we expect to come in, what do we expect to go out. And I think that's what we're talking about, is that item. And it was a deficit budget, a large part because we had gone from, I believe, a $900,000 annual contract to $720,000. So it was a decrease.
Well, that was the prior fiscal year budget. It showed $900,000 as the income.
Okay. Then I may be thinking of a different document.
I don't think you prepared that document, Mr. Gunkel.
Well, I think I can visualize what we're discussing, but in concept, I want to try to address that. I'm trying to clear that up, right?
Sure. I appreciate that. It's just again, a question from my end about, you know, you're right, we may not have asked for all of those other financial reports that showed that reserve policy in effect, but the ones we did ask for and received didn't show it. And so I'm asking the question of why it would have shown up on one and not the other.
Okay. I'm not sure what was asked, and at any rate, yes, sir.
Sure. Well, I appreciate it.
And I mean, to add to that, I almost hesitate to say anything to two people who have run successful businesses in Stillwater for as long as Mr. Baker and as long as Mr. Norris have. Being in business for myself also, I'm a little wet behind the ears here, but any private partnership that I've ever been involved in, when I'm investing money somewhere, there is an investor's report, whether it be on a quarterly basis, an annual basis, or a biannual basis. So if we're going to make the argument that these are private funds that cross over when the funds are dispersed, then I would expect that there be some kind of investor's report in that case, if the city is going to invest quote unquote private funds. I personally have been trying to get a copy of a balance sheet, a copy of a profit loss statement for the last probably close to 9 months. As soon as this April 23rd memo came across my desk, that's something we've been trying to get a hold of. This April 23rd memo is referencing the deficit budget that Mayor Joyce was referencing earlier. That was also asking for $80,000 in extra funds to put on Visit Stillwater again. And at that time, it was not disclosed to this board that there was any kind of reserve fund at all. And that's where it gets a little frustrating on our end, trying to piece all this stuff together when we don't have things like a profit loss statement or even a balance sheet. And that's maybe something that we can all benefit from moving forward, is sitting down and saying, well, maybe this is something that should be done, on a quarterly basis. We all sit down, look at the numbers, and see where the money's going. Because, I'm not going to presume I know more about destination marketing than anybody on the Visit Stillwater staff. That is not my forte. But I am in charge of, or at least my charge is to ensure that taxpayer funds are spent in the most efficient manner. And I would be derelict of my duty if I was not doing that. So one of the points that maybe we can all take away from this is maybe all of us need to be a little bit more active in that respect, sitting down and looking at the numbers together. Because like I said, I would not presume to tell you where to spend that money. I am not the person to do that. I'm still trying to figure out the healthcare business. So, but I think that from a reporting standpoint, we can, maybe us as a board, do a better job at voicing what it is that we want to look at, so that we can all ensure that the funds are being spent in a responsible manner.
Certainly. We're glad to provide whatever you'd like, and I'm not sure what that request was, and again, on an ongoing, the board meets monthly, that's provided to them, and going forward, they will be providing financials, balance sheet, profit and loss, going forward, without a doubt. And we would welcome it if that looks like a study session. I don't know what that looks like, to where there's communication and open communication that we can talk about.
Well, I think Mr. Gregory would appreciate the term study session, so we could definitely do that moving forward.
We would welcome that at your pleasure.
Thank you. Trustees, any other comments on this item?
No, thank you.
Thank you all again for being here and for the discussion, and we'll look forward to continuing it. All right, it takes us to item 6, reports from officers and boards. Mr. Dorman.
Nothing to report, sir.
Mr. McNichol.
Nothing, sir.
Trustees,
No, sir.
is there a motion to adjourn the Stillwater Economic Development Authority meeting?
So moved.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to adjourn SEDA. Please vote. With what I will assume is a vote of 5-0, we are now adjourned from SEDA. At this time, I will reconvene the Stillwater City Council meeting. We are at the item, there it is. Item 12, is there a motion to enter executive session?
Motion to enter executive session.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to enter executive session. Please vote. With a vote of 5-0, we'll now enter executive session. Thank you all.